I've considered perhaps there are intersecting mental health issues as it relates to your personality disorder, but those issues can best be addressed in a confined setting where the Department of Corrections will be charged statutorily to evaluate you and to provide any medical or mental health treatment that you need. This is a case that falls squarely on the need to protect the community. I referenced this earlier. There's really three primary reasons for the sentences I will impose here today. One is punishment, one is to protect the community, and the other is to provide justice and closure to the victims. Because under that category of need to protect, the court does get to consider the impact of these crimes on the victims. I went through at length in reviewing all of those victim impact statements. I certainly didn't go through every single one, just highlighting some of them, but doing so with purpose, because it is very clear to this court that Mr. Brooks has caused carnage, mayhem. It has resulted in many people suffering from PTSD, from mental and emotional trauma that will take a lifetime to recover from, and for some, perhaps, if at all. You have taken away from these individuals future memories. They will never have birthdays with the 6 individuals who were killed. There will be no weddings. There will be no graduations. There will be none of the milestones that these families were looking forward to, whether it be for an innocent 8-year-old or an innocent 79-year-old. Frankly, Mr. Brooks, no one is safe from you. This community can only be safe if you are behind bars for the rest of your life. The actions of Darrell Brooks demand punishment. The community is not safe from your violent and criminal conduct unless you are in custody. You left a path of destruction, chaos, death, injury, confusion, and panic as you drove 7 or so blocks through the Christmas parade, never once stopping or seemingly caring about the wake of carnage that you left. 4 of those blocks were turned into a scene that frankly is no different than a war zone. On counts 1 through 6, this court is imposing a life sentence without the possibility or eligibility for extended supervision consecutive to one another. 1 life sentence for Virginia Sorensen. 1 life sentence for Leanna Owen. 1 life sentence for Tamara Durand. 1 life sentence for Jane Kulik. 1 life sentence for Bill Hospel. And 1 life sentence for Jackson Sparks. I've considered the enhancer and the additional 5 years that I could impose, but I don't need to really order that because I've not made him eligible for extended supervision, and it would only be to increase his time on initial confinement. But make no mistake, Mr. Brooks, you use that vehicle as a battering ram, no different than, frankly, a firearm. On counts 7 through 67, these are 61 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety. These charges alone and these convictions without the enhancer carry a maximum of 12.5 years. Because of the enhancer, a total of 17.5 years. And under Wisconsin law, the 5 years is added to the initial term of confinement. So what could be 7.5 years is a maximum of 12.5 years. And I'd ask that everyone no longer show any reaction to the sentence so I can get through this. On counts 7 through 67, on each count I will impose a total sentence of 17.5 years. 12.5 years of initial confinement, plus 5 years of extended supervision, consecutive to any other sentence that I've imposed here today. That is 762.5 years of initial confinement and 305 years of extended supervision on top of the life sentences that I've imposed. That is 17.5 years, sir, for Nicole White. 17.5 years for Eleanor Anders. 17.5 years for Sasha Catalan Castillo. 17.5 years for Maura Gilchrist. 17.5 years for Justin Gullickson. 17.5 years for Harry Guilfoy. 17.5 years for Aidan Lofgren. 17.5 years for Theo Maza. 17.5 years for Tyler Pudliner. 17.5 years for Connor Tank. 17.5 years for Eric Teagues. 17.5 years for Adelia Maffioli. 17.5 years for Kelly Graybow. 17.5 years for Josh Craner. 17.5 years for Riley Rogers. 17.5 years for Caden Rogers. 17.5 years for Tucker Sparks. 17.5 years for Isabella Bartlett. 17.5 years for Yaritzi Becerra Montez. 17.5 years for Samantha Coelho. 17.5 years for Madison Hollingsworth. 17.5 years for Mackenzie Hollingsworth. 17.5 years for Mitchell Lampine. 17.5 years for Kathleen Pielmeyer. 17.5 years for Julia Schleichow. 17.5 years for Olivia Stover. 17.5 years for Jennifer Stover. 17.5 years for Jesselyn Torres. 17.5 years for Alice Urell. 17.5 years for Charlotte Urell. 17.5 years for Vivian Urell. 17.5 years for Grayson Urell. 17.5 years for Lola Hospel. 17.5 years for Tamara Rosentreter. 17.5 years for Betty Strang. 17.5 years for Maria Alvarez Dominguez. 17.5 years for Gregoria Romelia Perez. 17.5 years for Elliot Hallmark. 17.5 years for Benjamin Hallmark. 17.5 years for Patrick Heppy. 17.5 years for Lori Locken. 17.5 years for Marisol Lopez Gutierrez. 17.5 years for Adair Lopez Rubelar. 17.5 years for Juan Marquez. 17.5 years for David Marquez. 17.5 years for William Mitchell. 17.5 years for Jason Petchloff. 17.5 years for Margaret Pachulis. 17 and a half years for Yamilet Perales Alvarez. 17 and a half years for Aylan Perales Alvarez. 17 and a half years for Ashley Perales Alvarez. 17 and a half years for Jose Perales Alvarez. 17 and a half years for Maria Perez. 17 and a half years for Camila Perez Gonzalez. 17 and a half years for Isaac Foglia. 17 and a half years for Deborah Ramirez. 17 and a half years for Charles Green. 17 and a half years for Lily Green. 17 and a half years for Brinley Harris. 17 and a half years for Kelsey Knapp. 17 and a half years for Owen Ricciati. On count 68 through 73, which are the 6 counts of hit and run resulting in death. These are 25-year felonies each. The court will do the following. On count 68, a 25-year total sentence, 15 years of initial confinement, 10 years of extended supervision. This will be concurrent to count 1. Count 69, the same sentence, 25 years total, 15 years of initial confinement, 10 years of extended supervision, concurrent to count 2. Did I say that the right way, the first one? Okay. Count 68 is concurrent to count 1. Count 69 is concurrent to count 2. Count 70, 25 years total, 15 years of initial confinement, 10 years of extended supervision, concurrent to count 3. Count 71, 25 years total, 15 years of initial confinement, 10 years of extended supervision, concurrent to count 4. Count 72, 25-year total, 15 years of initial confinement, 10 years of extended supervision, concurrent to count 5. And on count 73, a 25-year total sentence, 15 years of initial confinement, 10 years of extended supervision, concurrent to count 6. On count 74 and 75, the 2 felony counts of bail jumping, the court is ordering a 6-year sentence total on each count, 3 years of initial confinement, 3 years of extended supervision, consecutive to all other counts but concurrent with one another. And lastly, but certainly not least, the maximum sentence for the battery to Erica Patterson, 9 months consecutive to any other sentence. To order anything other than what I have done, sir, would be to unduly depreciate the seriousness of these offenses. It is needed, although largely symbolic, given the number of years that I have imposed here today, because frankly, you deserve it. I know it's symbolic, but it needs to hold you accountable in a very real and tangible way. For all of these sentences that I have imposed, I will order the following conditions: no contact with the victims as identified in the amended victim key or their families, no contact of any kind with Erica Patterson,